The weekend just passed was a whirlwind of intense diplomatic activity, marking a dramatic acceleration in efforts to resolve the Ukraine conflict following the high-stakes meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Immediately after their encounter, Trump reached out to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and key NATO leaders, setting the stage for a crucial gathering at the White House on Monday. This meeting brings together a powerhouse lineup: UK Prime Minister, Italian Prime Minister, German Chancellor, Finnish President, French President, NATO's Secretary General, the President of the European Commission, and Zelensky himself. The central topic on everyone's mind is the control of the Donbas region, a territory Russia insists Ukraine surrender entirely, demanding Moscow receive control without giving much back in exchange. Zelensky's message to Putin is blunt and resolute. Russia has failed to take Donetsk for 12 years, and Ukraine's constitution makes it absolutely impossible to give up or trade any part of its territory. Given the gravity of this territorial dispute, Zelensky stresses that any discussions should only occur in a trilateral format involving Ukraine, Russia, and the United States. So far, Russia has refused to participate in such talks, prompting calls for tougher sanctions as a consequence of their intransigence. So what exactly was agreed upon at the summit? Reuters reports that Russia proposed returning only small pockets of occupied Ukrainian territory, while pressing Ukraine to cede large swaths of land in its eastern Donbas region, areas it has never fully controlled, despite 14 years of fighting. What's more, Putin ruled out any ceasefire before a comprehensive peace agreement is signed. Under the deal Russia put forward, Ukraine would fully withdraw from the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, while Russia would freeze the front lines in southern regions like Kherson and Zaporizhia. Russia would also return modest portions of land it occupies in northern Sumy and northeastern Kharkiv areas, but demands full control over approximately 6,600 square kilometers in Donbas, where Ukraine has established very strong defensive fortifications. To make matters worse, Putin demands that the U.S. formally recognize Ukrainian lands currently under Russian control as Russian territory and calls for lifting all sanctions against Russia in return. Notably, Putin also indicated for the first time his willingness to consider providing Ukraine with a security guarantee. This shocking set of demands comes despite Russia's economy teetering on the brink of collapse, likely an opening gambit anticipating negotiations will require compromise. On the other side, Ukraine's position remains firm and unyielding. President Zelensky, speaking with EU and NATO leaders via virtual meetings, called for authentic negotiations beginning at the current front lines. The contact line marks the best baseline for talks, a stance supported by Europe. Zelensky also emphasized the necessity of a ceasefire preceding any final agreement, something Putin rejects outright, preferring to negotiate while fighting continues to maintain his strategic advantage. From Russia's perspective, a ceasefire would be counterproductive, granting Ukraine more time to reinforce defenses with additional equipment, troops, and weapons, making Putin's territorial ambitions harder to achieve. Even though Russia is making incremental advances, the pace is slow and casualties high. Putin's priority remains seizing as much land as possible, knowing a ceasefire would curtail this progress. It seems the U.S. has resigned itself to the reality that achieving a ceasefire before a deal is unlikely and is shifting focus to negotiating a final peace agreement instead.
Donbas remains the most contentious and strategically critical aspect of the conflict. This region includes the so-called Fortress Belt, a chain of 5 to 6 heavily fortified cities that Russia has failed to capture since the conflict began in 2014. Russia's demand that Ukraine surrender this territory despite its military failures there is met with staunch refusal by Ukraine. The strategic importance is immense. Relinquishing Donbas would open a direct route for Russia to attack Kharkiv, the country's second-largest city, and severely weaken Ukraine's ability to defend other critical areas. The painful lessons of history serve as a stark warning. In 2014, Ukraine, under U.S. and NATO advice, ceded Crimea hoping to avoid a wider war. Instead, it only fueled Putin's expansionist appetite. In 2022, Crimea became the launching pad for Russia's massive invasion of southern Ukraine, resulting in the rapid capture of key territories. Ukraine's refusal to surrender Donbas reflects a determination to avoid repeating the mistake of appeasement that only emboldened Russia further. Putin continues to use propaganda extensively to shift blame onto Ukraine and Zelensky, painting them as obstacles to peace in Western countries to reduce arms support for Kyiv. Former General David Petraeus recently emphasized Donbas's military significance, underlining that increased support from the US, Europe, and other Western allies could dramatically shift the battlefield dynamics. Putin's key objectives are to replace Zelensky with a pro-Russian leader, demilitarize Ukraine after any ceasefire, and claim more territory in the Donbas region, especially the heavily defended fortress belt. Losing this defensive line would expose Ukraine to future invasions via major urban centers, a risk deemed unacceptable by Kyiv's leadership. Beyond Ukraine, the conflict stands as a defining moment for Europe's geopolitical future. Putin's imperial ambitions to restore Russian dominance clash fundamentally with the vision of a sovereign democratic Ukraine backed by a united Europe. His regime's aggressive tactics, ranging from brutal military force and disinformation campaigns to nuclear threats, challenge not only Ukraine's sovereignty but the entire international order. European leaders, aware of Kremlin's manipulative strategies, are gearing up to address the information warfare alongside military and diplomatic efforts. French President Emmanuel Macron has publicly declared his disbelief that Putin genuinely seeks peace, asserting instead that Putin demands Ukraine's capitulation. In response, the EU continues to bolster its support for Ukraine, unveiling its 19th package of sanctions and preparing to deploy multinational forces from the coalition of the willing to secure Ukraine's skies and seas once hostilities cease. The coalition members praised President Trump's commitment to providing security guarantees, akin to a NATO Article 5 clause, and pledged to play a vital role in a multinational security apparatus supporting Ukraine's defense and reconstruction. The urgency couldn't be clearer. Mere days after Trump's meeting with Putin, the whirlwind of calls, video conferences, and strategic meetings among Western leaders highlights a shared understanding that decisive action is crucial to bring peace sooner rather than later. Ultimately, this period is one of precarious hope and high stakes. The negotiation table spans fierce military realities, core geopolitical struggles, and profound humanitarian crises. With Russia poised to threaten Europe's independence and stability, the outcome of these talks will resonate far beyond Ukraine's borders, shaping the balance of power for decades. The cliffhanger is set. Will diplomacy succeed in halting Putin's advance, or will imperial ambitions drown Ukraine's hard-won sovereignty? The world watches, and the next moves could redefine history.